The Serpent in the Grass. 1. The Announcer of Fate. They say the sun shines brightest on those who are destined for greatness. For me, Lizzy, I believe the sun was a fickle thing, shining only on those with a plump purse and a secure future. My beauty was my shield, my wit my spear, and my hunger for a better life was the constant drumbeat in my chest. I had watched Kola, with his tall, slender grace and his rich man's ease, and I had seen in him not just a man, but an escape, a key to a world where I would no longer have to pretend to be anything but the successful, comfortable woman I knew I was meant to be. Kola was like a palm tree planted by a riverbank, firm in his faith and his love for Sade. Sade, with her smooth, elegant skin and quiet confidence, was his river. They were a pair woven from the same thread since they were little children, running barefoot through the village paths. They were a story everyone knew, a bond as old as the earth itself. They studied together, laughed together, and moved as one. I was a third wheel, a clever, pretty shadow in their light, but I made sure my presence was felt. I was their friend, their course mate, a trusted confidant. But then, one evening, as we sat under the orange glow of a street lamp, the ground shifted beneath my feet. Kola, with a quiet joy that lit up his handsome face, announced his plan to formally propose to Sade. The words landed on me like a stone dropped into a deep well. The splash was silent, but the ripples were a tsunami in my heart. The window was not just closing, it was slamming shut. The comfortable future I had seen for myself was fading into a horizon of dust and poverty. A cold, hard voice in my head whispered, "Lizzy, you have one chance. One small opening to pry that window back open." 2. A plan forged in shadow. The next day, my mind was a whirlwind of calculations. Sade was a good girl, a committed Christian like Kola. She believed in pure love, untainted by the shadows I lived in. Kola, in his innocence, was a lamb ripe for the shearing. He was a Pentecostal, committed to a life of purity. His strength was his greatest weakness, for his faith meant he would not look at another woman, nor would he break a sacred vow lightly. But what if that vow was already broken? What if he thought he had already fallen? My plan, a serpent coiled in the grass, began to take shape. It was a simple, brutal thing. I would create a scenario that would leave him with only one option, me. I went to the market and bought a bottle of his favorite drink, a local brew he loved. I bought it openly, with a cheerful smile, telling the vendor I was planning a small celebration. Then, on a day when all four of us were together, I made my move. "What is this I hear about a celebration?" David asked, his timid eyes, always following me like a lost puppy, briefly meeting mine before darting away. He was a good boy, a man who saw me as a goddess on a pedestal he could never reach. He was in love with me, and he thought he was a ghost. He knew I wanted Kola, and he ached silently for me. I would use that knowledge later, if I needed to. "Nothing yet," I chirped, "but I was thinking we should celebrate our good grades. My place tonight. I'll make a feast." Sade and Kola agreed readily. David, of course, was happy to go wherever I was. The trap was set. My final piece was to remove Sade from the scene. As they were about to leave, I excused myself to make a call. I found a young boy loitering nearby, gave him a few notes, and a message to deliver to Sade. It was a lie, a bitter lie, woven to sound like a truth. "Tell her," I instructed, "that her grandmother has fallen ill in town and is asking for her. Tell her it is urgent." The boy scampered off, his errand boy's joy at the few notes I gave him a stark contrast to the pain I was about to unleash. Moments later, Sade's phone rang. I saw the color drain from her face. "My grandmother is sick," she whispered, her eyes wide with concern. "Go," Kola said, his hand on her shoulder. I will wait for you. I will stay with Kola, I said, my voice dripping with concern. Let me walk you to the taxi stand. As I walked her away, I saw the confusion in her eyes. My grandmother, she just visited us last week. She was fine. Sometimes these things happen suddenly, I said, patting her hand. Go before it's too late. I'll make sure Kola is looked after. She thanked me, got into a taxi, and sped away. I returned to Kola, my heart a hammer in my chest. The door to my future was finally open, and I was about to walk through. 3. The empty bed. That evening, I prepared the food, my hands moving with a practiced ease. I was a master of appearances, and tonight was my masterpiece. Kola arrived, a worry etched on his face for Sade's grandmother. I poured him a glass of his favorite drink. It was a beautiful dark red liquid, and I watched the vial of white powder dissolve into it, the potion of my evil plan. A toast, I said, raising my glass, to your future and to Sade's grandmother's swift recovery. He smiled, a genuine trusting smile, and drank. I watched him. At first, he was normal, his conversation flowing easily. But then a subtle change. His eyes, usually so bright and focused, became glassy. His speech slurred. He blinked slowly, as if fighting off sleep. Kola? I asked, my voice feigning concern. Are you all right? Just tired, he mumbled, his head drooping. He swayed slightly, and I moved closer, my arm around his waist. The night is long, I said, guiding him towards my bedroom. You can rest here for a bit. I will call Sade when she gets back. He stumbled into the room, and I helped him to the bed. The poison in the drink was not meant to harm, only to cloud his mind, to make him docile, a puppet for my game. He lay on the bed, his breathing becoming heavy. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling. This was it, the moment I had planned. I began to undress him, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. He was a tall, handsome man, and in this state, he was a thing of beauty and shame. His eyes were closed, his head lolling to the side. He was a statue, a vessel. My hand slid down his chest, unzipping his trousers. He was half naked, and the sight of his vulnerability, his complete trust in me, should have been a wake-up call. But the voice in my head, the hunger for a life of comfort, drowned out any whispers of conscience. I undressed myself, my clothes a discarded skin, and slid into bed beside him. I moved his arms around my waist, his head on my shoulder, trying to position us in a way that would suggest a shared intimacy. He was already a dead weight, snoring softly, lost to the world. All my physical manipulations, all my careful positioning, were met with the inert silence of a man who was already gone. I tried to rouse him, to make him respond, to give some semblance of a consensual act. Nothing. He was an empty shell, and I, a desperate artist, could not make him dance. Exhausted and frustrated, I eventually fell into a fitful, dreamless sleep beside him, the scent of a lie clinging to the air around us. 4. The crushing of a heart. The journey back was a torment for Sade. As her taxi sped back towards our shared lodgings, her mind raced. She had called her parents in Lagos, a distance of 70 kilometers, just to be sure. They were surprised to hear from her. Grandmother? She is right here with us, her mother said, her voice filled with confusion. She came to visit this morning. The truth was a cold slap to Sade's face. The urgent call, the worried tone, the boy who delivered the message, it was all a lie, a fabrication. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that something was terribly wrong. She paid the taxi driver, her heart a drum of fear and fury, and rushed to Kola's room, which was next to mine. The door was ajar. A low snore escaped from within. She pushed it open, her mind screaming a silent prayer that she was wrong, that her suspicions were the product of a fevered mind. The sight that greeted her was a nightmare rendered in the harsh light of dawn. There on the bed lay Kola, his chest bare, his trousers pooled around his ankles, and on top of him, her head buried in his shoulder, her clothes scattered across the floor, was me, Lizzy. I was not just on him, I was on him as if we had shared a night of passion. Sade's world splintered. The image of the two of us, so intimate, so complete, was a venom that seeped into every corner of her soul. She looked at Kola, his innocent face lost in sleep, and then she looked at me, pretending to be asleep, my body a silent testament to a betrayal so profound it felt like a death. She did not scream. She did not shout. She simply stood there, a statue of grief, and then, with a silent, broken sob, she turned and walked away. The sound of her footsteps, a distant echo in the corridor, was the sound of a heart breaking. I heard them, but I kept my eyes closed, a victor in a war I had not yet won. 5. The pleading and the confession. I woke to Cola's shouts. Lizzy, what is happening? Why are you? I sat up, my face a mask of shock and shame. Kola? Oh dear God, I don't know. He was confused, his head pounding, his memory a fragmented mosaic of shadows and a deep, dreamless sleep. He stumbled around the room, trying to make sense of the clothes on the floor, the two of us in the bed, the heavy, shameful silence. He pleaded his innocence, but to whom? The evidence was all around us. He rushed to his room, and when he saw that Sade's things were gone, he knew. He knew he had lost her. He knocked on her door, he called her name, but she was gone. In his despair, he turned to David. David, the timid shadow, the man who adored me, was a friend he could trust. He poured out the story, the confusion, the accusation I had made, that he had slept with me. David, listening with a silent dread, could not reconcile the image of his saintly friend with the betrayal. A new fire ignited in David's heart, a desperate, misguided blaze. He saw his chance, not to help Kola, but to win me. He had always seen me as unattainable, a goddess of beauty and wit. But if I was a fallen angel, then perhaps I was within his reach. He went to my room, his usual timidity replaced by a nervous, bold determination. Lizzy, he began, his voice shaky. Kola is engaged. He loves Sade. Please, forget him. Look at me. I've always loved you. I looked at him, and I saw a poor substitute, a man without wealth, without ambition, a shadow of the future I wanted. David, I said, my voice cold, don't be foolish. My mind is made up. His face twisted with hurt and anger. He looked at the bottle on the table, the very same bottle I had used to spike Cola's drink. There was a little left, a few sips of the bitter, white-laced liquid. He grabbed it, his hands shaking, and swallowed it in one greedy gulp, as if it were a potion that would give him the courage he had always lacked. He lunged at me, a wild desperation in his eyes, his hands grasping at my arms. You will not go to Kola, he shouted, his voice slurred, his body swaying from the effects of the drink. He was no longer the timid David. He was a desperate animal, a man driven mad by unrequited love and a foolish potion. I struggled, my heart hammering in my chest. Then a knock on the door. It was Kola, coming to ask me to confess, to clear his name. He saw us, saw David struggling with me, saw the desperation and the fear. He roared, his righteous anger a furnace, and tore David off me. He threw him out of our circle of friends, banished him with a finality that was absolute. 5b. The Bitter Harvest. The news of Sade and Kola's breakup spread through the campus like wildfire. The shame, the confusion, the gossip. It was a dark cloud that hung over us all. Kola, in his despair and urged by his traditional family, who believed in the shame of a pregnancy out of wedlock, was forced to marry me. We had a quiet, somber wedding, a mockery of the joyous ceremony he and Sade were meant to have. A few months later, I gave birth to a beautiful son. Kola was a good husband, a kind man, but the love he had for me was a duty, not a passion. My life had changed, but it was not the life I had dreamed of. The joy of my victory was a hollow echo. And then the wind of fate changed direction once more. Kola's father, a powerful man in a government position, was caught in a web of corruption. His name was dragged through the mud, his reputation shattered. He was sacked from his job, his assets frozen. Overnight, the family's wealth vanished like water in the sand. We went from comfort to a meager existence, a life of counting every coin. My triumph turned to ashes in my mouth. I had played a long, deceitful game, and my prize was a poor, shamed husband and a life of struggle. The serpent I had been became the scorpion that bit me. I began to look elsewhere. A rich young neighbor, a man with a car and a swagger, caught my eye. My heart, a fickle compass, turned towards him. I went to Kola and told him I wanted a divorce. He was devastated, but I was relentless. I was no longer interested in a life of hardship. During the proceedings, the court, in its wisdom, asked for a paternity test for our 4-year-old son. I agreed, confident in the outcome, ready to get my freedom and my new prize. The results came back a few days later, and they were a testament to the fact that a lie, no matter how carefully woven, will always unravel. The child was not Kola's. My carefully constructed world came crashing down. The judge asked me to confess, to tell the truth. With nothing left to lose, the shame a bitter cloak around me, I broke. I told the whole truth, how I had planned to trap Kola, how David had come to my room that night, drunk on the same potion I had prepared for Kola, and how he had forced himself on me. The neighbor, who had been watching from the gallery, walked out silently, his interest in me evaporating like a morning mist. I was alone. The child was not Kola's, and I had no one. I went to Kola, my shame and my desperation a tangled knot in my throat, and I confessed that the child was David's. I told him I would return the 4-year-old boy to his father, to give him a better life, and to free myself to pursue other men. I had played the game, and I had lost it all. 6. A new path and a broken past. Healed, after the divorce was finalized, Kola was a free man, a man whose name was finally cleared. Though his heart was a land of sorrow, he found David, a broken man himself, a ghost of his former self. They talked, they cried, and they reconciled. David, with a courage he had never known before, told Kola the truth of that night. He confessed his own foolishness, his unrequited love, and the terrible thing he had done while under the influence of the same poison that had clouded Kola's mind. David, now an agent of healing, took Kola to Sade. She had never married, her heart a frozen lake since the day she found Kola and me in the bed. They met, a solemn, tearful reunion. David, standing beside Kola, a living witness, told her everything. He explained Lizzy's scheme, the spiked drink, Kola's innocence, and the cruel lie that had separated them for so many years. He showed her the child, his child, the fruit of his own desperate sin, a living testament to the truth. Sade looked at Kola, her eyes filled with a love that had never died, only been buried under a mountain of hurt. He was the same man she had known since childhood, the same man whose heart had been as pure as his faith. They were two broken halves of a single whole, and in that moment, under the quiet gaze of the setting sun, They began the slow, painful process of healing. I had torn them apart, but in my own destruction, I had also created the space for them to find their way back to each other. The serpent in the grass was gone, and the palm tree and the river were reunited, their story a powerful reminder that truth, no matter how long it takes, will always find its way to the light.